I'm going to do a little something different on you today, Caitlin. We'll sit right here. Okay, guys. I'm not a sermon speaker. I'm going to give up trying to do that. I'm a teacher. So today, I'm going to expand on our reading from Genesis. And I'm hoping that some of you have a little bit more of the biblical backstory in this than most. I'll add what I can. But today's teaching, our reading about the blessing of the children and the adoption of Joseph's children, that's where your hope comes from as a Gentile. And there is also a very strong warning hiding behind that passage. And I want to expand on that today. Pick up in 48:4, and you'll have to forgive me. I'm going to be reading from an NASB Bible today. Ray will be along as soon as we're done here. And it says, and this is my study Bible. It's one I use. He says, and he said to me, behold, I will make you fruitful and numerous, and I'll make you a company of people, and will give this land to your descendants after you for an everlasting possession. I looked it up. Company of people. I don't know how to pronounce this word. Kahal. Qahal. Kahal. It says a congregation or an assembly. And people. So a company of people. Got that? Okay. It's referencing Genesis 35, 10 through 12. So I jumped myself back there and I read it. And it says, Yahweh said to him, your name is Jacob. You shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel shall be your name. Thus he called him Israel. Yahweh also said to him, I am Elohim Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall come from you, and kings shall come from you. The land which I gave to Abraham and to Isaac I will give to you, and I will give you the land to your descendants after you. So me being who I am, I looked that up. And it says a nation and a company of nations. Yep. But the words are slightly different. Goy, kahal, goyim. So nation and a company of nations. Company of nations. Hold on to that for just a minute. This gets fun. Back to 48:5. Genesis 48:5. This is now your two sons who were born to you in the land of Egypt. Before I came to Egypt are mine. Ephraim and Manasseh shall be mine, as Reuben and Simeon are mine. Why is this important to us? How many of you know how to count whether or not you're a Hebrew? It's counted maternally through the mother. Ephraim and Manasseh are goyim. They're not eligible for inheritance into the tribes unless Israel adopts them. And then what does he do in the next verse, or several next verses? He says, so they're my kids now, and I'll give back to you, Joseph, their descendants. In the blessing of these children, Jacob starts off by repairing a breach that was created when Joseph was cast into Egypt, because it broke with the traditional lineage. They're no longer counted as Hebrews, now they're Goyim. Why would that be important for us? Because he's also going to give Ephraim the birthright. It would have broke the covenant that Yahweh made with his people. So this blessing starts off very important right there. Jacob gives that back. It's also crucial here that what we're dealing with Joseph and then later with Benjamin are Rachel's two children. And if we'll remember back a few Sabbaths, Sister Joellen pointed out to us that Rachel was cursed by Jacob. Let whoever is caught with those idols die. Spiritual death. What happens to the house of Israel? They're divorced. They're given a spiritual death. Who's the leader of the house of Israel? Ephraim. This is all connected. This is all in this passage. I learn it when I study the concepts. This is why it's important to me. And if we're interested, the maternal descent of the children, after Exodus, you'll find the background of that in Ezra. So it's in our scriptures and it's in some of the Deuterocanonical too, so we know where we get that. So I jumped to 48:6, back into Genesis. It said, but your offspring that have been born after them shall be yours. They shall be called by the name of their brothers in their inheritance. So he gives them back to Joseph. And they're going to be inheritance. Restores a breach. Then to 48, 13 and 14. This is where it starts. Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand toward Israel's left, and Manasseh with his left hand toward Israel's right, and brought them close. But Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on the head of Ephraim, who was the younger, and his left hand on Manasseh's head, crossing his hands, although Manasseh was the firstborn. Much here. What's that Hebrew letter? Tav. Sign of the Tav. What's Tav mean? Strong promise or covenant. The renewed covenant. The covenant that was promised by Jeremiah. Why is this important? Because it goes to Ephraim, the leader of the house of Israel. Through who are we grafted in? Judah or Israel? You're grafted in through the dead wife, the divorced wife, the cursed tribe, Israel, which will be made new through the blood of Christ. Follow me. It gets better. It's all here. We just don't make the connection because we get too wrapped up in the verse, not the thought. So Jacob gives all these children back and he crosses his arm. In the process, he makes Ephraim firstborn. Puts him above Manasseh. And that also breaks with the inheritance customs, which is why Joseph gets upset. But then he turns around in a few later verses later and he does something Joseph doesn't complain about. We'll catch that in just a minute. So we're dealing with breaches here. Another breach. Tamar's kids. Remember the red thread around the hand? So we're tracking through breaches after breaches. These are not all been corrected yet. That's part of the Messiah's mission, to put the kingdom back together, to correct the breaches. The breaches are in the background here. Judah has a breach in his lineage. We now have a breach in Joseph's lineage, which will be the leader of the house of Israel. Remember, the Levites, they're not treated like a normal tribe because they were the only loyal tribe when the golden calf was made. So their inheritance is Yahweh. Joseph was the only other faithful son of Jacob, so he's treated different too. He's split. He's given a double portion. See, that's going to be, what, Genesis 48, 20, 21 and 22? Get to that in a minute. 15 and 16. It says, he blessed Joseph and said, the Elohim before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the Elohim who has been my shepherd all my life to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads. He's asking blessing from Yahweh and the angel of Yahweh onto these children. He says, may my name live on them, and the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and may they grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. When he puts his name on them, he's putting his title, his character, his authority, and what else is he putting on them? His birthright. He's putting his blessing on them. He's moving them ahead of everybody else in his house and his family. So, and then he gives them to dwell within grow in the land. I looked that up too. And it just literally means to dwell within the middle or the midst of the land. And both boys will grow into a multitude in the middle of the earth. R-O-B, multitude, abundance. I was wondering what it means to be middle of the earth. Because he didn't say grow in the Holy Land. We'll get there. Jump to verse 19. But his father refused and said, I know, my son, I know. He also will become a people, and he also will be great. However, his younger brothers shall be greater than he, and his descendants shall become a multitude of nations. This is where I know it starts to get fun, and this is where most people miss it. Jacob explains Manasseh will become a people. The Hebrew is Am, people. But Ephraim will be greater, a multitude of people. A company of nations is how we translate it, but it's Milo Goyim. It's actually Goy Hag Goyim, fullness of the nations. Where do you know that passage from, folks? Ephraim is going to be a fullness of the nations. Romans 11, verse 25. It says, for I do not want you, brethren, to be uninformed of this mystery, so that you will not be wise in your own estimation, that a partial hardening has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. And so all Israel will be saved, just as it was written, the deliverer will come from Zion, and he will remove ungodliness from Jacob. This is my covenant with them, when I take away their sins. The fullness of the Goyim, the fullness of the Gentiles. Do we think Paul's talking about Jews? Or do we think maybe Paul knows what he's talking about there with the house of Israel? Paul's talking about the house of Israel. So when he says all Israel will be saved, now he could be talking about all just the house of Israel there, or he could be talking about Jacob. You got to watch context, because when he says all Israel, sometimes that's exactly what's being talked about there. But he's referencing Isaiah 59:20 in that passage. Israel is the house, it's the divorced wife. Hosea 2:23. This one I want to make sure we read. Hosea 2:23. You have to excuse me, my glasses are not cooperating with me. Here we go. I will sow her for myself in the land. I will also have compassion on her, who had not obtained compassion. And I will say to those who are not my people, you are my people. And they will say, you are my Elohim. Hosea is talking about the house of Israel sown into the land, the midst of the land, where Manasseh and Israel will grow to be nations in the midst of the land, where the whole world will say, you don't belong to Yahweh, you're not Hebrews. And yet it says, yes, you are. Hosea 1:8-10. 1:8-10. I think that's it. And the Lord and Yahweh said, name him Lo Ami, for you are not my people, and I am not your Elohim. Yet the number of the sons of Israel will be like the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured or numbered. And in the place where it is said to them, you are not my people, it will be said to them, you are the sons of the living Elohim. And the sons of Yehuda and the sons of Israel will be gathered together, and they will be appointed for themselves one leader, and they will go up from the land from the great day with the day of Jezreel. He's talking about the two houses right there. And they will be sown into the land. This is a prophetic utterance that comes from this chapter we're reading in Genesis. And so from here, we go back to Genesis. This is where 48, 21, and 20, 21, 22 come into play. 48, 21, and 22. This is, whoops, that's 49. I want 48. There we go. Then Israel said to Joseph, behold, I'm about to die, but Yahweh will be with you and bring you back to the land of your father. I give you one portion more than your brothers, which I took from the hand of the Amorite, with my sword and my bow. He gives Joseph one portion more. What does he do in that process? What is he doing? He just put Joseph at the head of the house. Joseph's now the head of the house of Israel, of Jacob. Well, why? The double portion goes to the firstborn. Firstborn is the head of the house. As the patriarch of his house, of all of Israel, Jacob, the house of Jacob, he's just made Joseph leader. And when he crossed his arms with Ephraim, he put Ephraim as the head of that tribe. Ephraim now holds the birthright that was given by Yahweh through Abraham to Jacob. What's the birthright? It's not just the land, but it's all the promises that Yahweh made, said they will be traced through Isaac. All those promises now rest on the head of Ephraim. Now we move to the really fun part that most people just don't even pay attention to. 49:10. The scepter shall not depart from Yehuda, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until Shiloh comes, and to him shall be obedience of the people. Until Shiloh comes. Some people read that as David, but ultimately this is seemed to be understood as a messianic passage. Until Messiah comes. First time or second? It's already come. The scepter's moved. Now we can argue over where it is now, but there's a very good case to be made that it was moved by Jeremiah when he went into Egypt to Ireland, one overturning, to Scotland, a second overturning, and back to England, a third overturning. There were 3 overturnings of the kings in Jeremiah's day. The other 3 overturnings were far in the future. And how many times does prophecy seem to have this now and later ring to it. So we could go there if we want to. I happen to believe there's something to it. But the part here is Judah's given the scepter. But then 49:22. Joseph is a fruitful bough or brow by a spring, its branches run over a wall. Israel is a fruitful vineyard. And the vineyard man who made it, Yahweh, put a wall around it. Joseph's going to go over the wall. And his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, are going to spread out into the midst of the nations. It's going to run over that bough. That's what we're being told. Remember, blessings are prophecy, folks. Blessings are prophecy. So we're being told ahead of time that Joseph's two sons, their tribes, are going to be outside of the Holy Land. This is an image of the nation of Israel, the house of Israel. And it's a prophecy of them going to be spread out into the nations. Then I want to take us to Deuteronomy 33, 13 through 17, because all of this is coming to me as I was reading this passage. I was listening to you read it. So Deuteronomy 33, I'll pick up in verse 13. Of Joseph, he said, blessed of Yahweh be his land, with the choice things of heaven with the dew, and from the deep lying beneath, and with the choice yield of the sun, and with the choice produce of the months, and with the best things of the ancient mountains, and with the choice things of the everlasting hills, and with the choice things of the earth and the fullness, and the favor of him who dwelt in the bush. Let it come to the head of Joseph, and to the crowns of the head of the one distinguished among his brothers. And the firstborn of his ox, majesty is his, and his horns are the horns of the wild ox. With them he will push the peoples all at once to the ends of the earth, and those are the 10,000s of Ephraim, and those are the thousands of Manasseh. The horns of Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh, his power, will push the peoples. It doesn't say Goyim. It says Yahweh's people will be pushed to the ends of the earth by the house of Joseph's two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. Oh, we've heard Brother Kenyon give us this speech so many times. It all starts in this blessing with the two children. And what has the house of Israel done? Manasseh is probably still sitting in England. Ephraim came this way. Ephraim went all the way to the farthest points west before you start going east again, to the ends of the earth. Guess what else we have in this passage with Joseph in chapter 50? Genesis. He dies. It connects us. The Samaritan woman, the well. We don't know the backstory. A Hebrew would. The well where she's at is overwatched by the burial site of Joseph's bones. Joseph's bones are looking over that scene. Why is that important? She's a Samaritan. She's of the house of Israel, the northern tribes. Who's she talking to? Yeshua. This is the very first time in the New Testament where he clearly says, I am the Messiah, the one you've been waiting for. Why does he say that so clearly there? He's in the land of the people he was sent to go see, to seek out. I am sent but for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So he is finally speaking face to face in the New Testament with somebody who represents the folks he's after. And he tells her, you don't understand how to worship Yahweh correctly. We Jews do, because we're still married to him and we're keeping Torah. You don't, but we'll correct it for you. But he's being overwatched by the bones of Joseph, which jumps us all the way back to Genesis 48, 49, 50. So Hosea 2, verses 14, 16. Let me jump us over there real quick. Hosea 2, picking up in 14. Therefore, behold, I will allure her, bring her into the wilderness, speaking of Israel, and speak kindly to her. Then I will give her vineyards from there. All right, wilderness. In the prophetic language, that's the nations. That's anything outside of the holy land of Israel. So Israel is going to be out into the wilderness. This is the house of Israel. And I will give her vineyards from there, places to live, gardens, safe places. And the valley of Achor as a door of hope. The valley of Achor is symbolic in the Hebrew culture of trials and tribulations. It's the valley where all bad things happen, struggles, stress. So the house of Israel is going to endure many tribulations to get to these valleys, to these vineyards. And she will sing there as in the days of her youth, in that day when she came up from the land of Egypt. Sing a new song. She will learn the new covenant in these vineyards, as in the days of her youth when she was first exited out of Egypt. Who remembers Jeremiah, where Yahweh says there will be a second exodus for the house of Israel? I'll bring her back out of the nations, the midst of the earth, back to the Holy Lands, and I'll do so by my own mighty hand. I'm paraphrasing, but this is Yahweh's words through his prophets. Back to Hosea, it says, it will come about in that day, declares Yahweh, that you will call me Ishi, and will no longer call me Baali. You will call me husband or master, in the sense of a husband, and no longer call me master in the sense that you're a slave. So where have we heard that one before? You've heard this one before. How about this passage? No longer do I call you slaves, for the slave does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends, for all things that I have heard from my Father I have made known to you. That thought from Hosea is in his head. You're no longer his servants. You're now married back to him. That passage from Hosea is talking about when the house of Israel will become a married wife again, betrothed again. When you're grafted into the house of Israel, you're betrothed. You're back under the same type of Hebrew marriage. It hasn't been consummated yet. That's the wedding supper. But you've accepted him as your master again. You're grafted in. And it's what we call saved. Being saved will be saved. You're now betrothed again. This is what Yeshua is telling us at the Last Supper. When you accept me and you learn to follow me and you be my disciple and you walk as I walked and you put your trust in my Father, you are now betrothed again. You're back into the divorced wife who has now been betrothed back to her husband Yahweh, or in this case Messiah. But that wedding hasn't come in consummated. We don't have the wedding supper yet. But we're betrothed again. We're promised again, which is in other parts of the prophets that we could have gone through if we wanted to. All of this is tied to those readings that we did today. It all stems from those readings. It all started with the blessing that Jacob gave to Ephraim and Manasseh. Now here's the part where the warning comes. This land is the prophetic land. It's one of the lands that was promised to Ephraim and Manasseh, to the house of Israel. This is the one where Ephraim was at. The reading with King David to his son Solomon. The founding fathers of David. Shlomo's the generation that the founding fathers had. And what did the generation after that do? Destroyed and had a civil war, and they separated. England sends its people over here, and we start out with 12 colonies that separate into 13. We see that pattern before. Joseph was 13. England loses us to a tax revolt. The patterns are there because we are a prophetic people, and the blessings and curses that were placed upon both Joseph, the house of Israel, and Ephraim will all follow us. So while we will get the blessings as well, if we keep to the covenant, we will also get the curses. And we now live in a land that has broke the covenant. And if we expect that we're going to continue to reap Yahweh's blessings when we are in violation of his covenant, we do not understand his word. We're in a nation that is at best at the doorstep of condemnation. If not, worse, we're already under Yahweh's wrath, just as the northern tribes underwent in the Old Testament. If it is true, and I believe it is, if it is true that we are descendants of that, or grafted in through the house of Israel, whether we are descendants of the tribes that don't know it or not, or whether we're Gentiles grafted in, we're following the pattern of the promises and the curses. And we are in the middle of the curse cycle because we forgot where we came from. I had to teach on that today, brother, and I thank you for letting me. Hopefully it helped, but I just had to explain what I'm seeing in that passage, because you cannot understand the gospel unless you understand that story. Well, why would I say that? Because Yeshua said, my gospel is the kingdom of Yahweh, putting it all back together. And I was sent but to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. He does not need to be sent to Judah. Judah's still married. Now, Judah still has to accept the renewed covenant, but Judah's still married. And she can make all sorts of mistakes toward the Messiah and be forgiven. as long as Judah doesn't turn her back on the Holy Spirit. And that's a teaching if a Jew realizes that Yeshua is Messiah and he still refuses or she still refuses, now they have trouble. But if they're still blinded, they're still under the promises that Yahweh gave to the house of Judah. But Israel, the house of Israel, led by Ephraim, where the birthright is, if you call yourself a disciple of the Messiah, you need to know that story. I just wanted to make sure I share that with y'all. Yahweh bless. I don't know what song we're supposed to sing because our music left.
Yeah.